man on a quest, day and night. Fearless, insatiable, even in his dreams late in life. And he notes everything.
I think that this idea of waking up people who are complacent was very Miller. He was probably the most open person I ever met. And he wanted other people to be open, to see, and he felt that people were blind.
Most of his books are about sex, relentless, obscene. But what does this mean to him? Is the egomaniac in him seeking pleasure? Or is he searching for a higher truth? Who was Henry Miller?
A sort of a monk with genitals.
Die Welt auffrischen, alles sich einzuverleiben. Die Welt besteht nur aus den Dingen, die er haben, essen und verdauen kann. Das war der Eindruck, den ich von ihm hatte. Durchaus sympathisch.
He used to say, I have the most incredible erotic dreams. And I would say, okay, Henry, tell me. And he'd say, oh, in my dreams, I'm fucking everybody.
Pretty good, very good. Yeah. So that's the kind of babies you have here, huh? Very good. All in one piece, too, huh? Yeah, yeah.
Miller grows up in New York at the turn of the century. His grandparents had emigrated from Germany and settled in Yorkville, the German quarter in Manhattan. He is baptized Heinrich after his father, who runs a tailor shop in Brooklyn. German narrow-mindedness awakens the rebel in him.
In that stupid German neighborhood, they were great disciplinarians. They were brutal people. All my boyfriends, when I go home with them, they would say, defend me, help me. If my father starts to hit me, grab something and let's run, you know. Huh? Yeah, it was all brutality and discipline, seemed to me. Crazy.
He hated that, what he calls the Germanic fault of allowing oneself to be subjugated, okay? And you just go because that's how it works. You just go along this one channel. You don't see the other worlds, right? You're just focused.
Oh, my mother, she was a peculiar woman, you know. The neighbors said she loved me. They said that she was really greatly fond of me and all that. I never felt any warmth from her. She never kissed me, never hugged me. I don't ever remember going to her and putting my arms around her, you know. That was a big loss. I didn't know that mothers did that till one day I visit a friend of mine, his house. We're 12 years old. And I go home with him, and his mother, they were English. And I hear the mother's voice. Jackie, oh, Jackie, she says, darling, how are you? How have you been? Puts her arms around him, you know, and kisses him. She says, I never heard that kind of language, do you see? That even that tone of voice, new to me.
I think he was searching for something in women that he couldn't find, that didn't really exist, because he had this ideal. There's a relationship that's very typical, I guess, of is the right word, of his attitude towards women, and that was his adoration of this young woman named Cora Seward that he knew as a youth in Brooklyn, and he was infatuated with her, but he could never kind of bring himself to approach her, to declare his interest in her. He used to go out and walk to her house and just stare up at the window, just longing for her. So he was kind of somebody who from a fairly early age was on a search for something that was truer to what his own real feelings were. And he was also, I think, in rebellion against his mother and her values and willing to do things that would outrage her. So he was consorting with prostitutes, he was going to dance halls, and he was taking up with older women. And he was doing things that would have deeply offended his mother, and that was kind of like a mission for him to do that.
He begins writing at this time, discovering his artistic side. The work in his father's tailor shop doesn't suit him at all, and his attempted marriage fails quickly, a result of boredom. His memories of this time are bitter.
Now I know. Now I know where I am and who I am. Back in that old shithole, New York, where I was born. A place where I knew nothing but starvation, humiliation, despair, frustration, every goddamn thing. Nothing but misery. Because this was the New York that I knew when I was being born, or rather, I didn't know it yet. Later, when I begin to explore it, why, it's a different city, a little more horrible, gets worse all the time. When I think of the Brooklyn Bridge, which was the only bridge then in existence, how many times I walked over that bridge on an empty stomach, back and forth, looking for a handout, never getting anything, selling newspapers at Times Square, begging on Broadway, coming home with a dime, maybe. It's no wonder that I had these goddamn recurrent nightmares all my life. I don't know how I ever survived, why I'm still sane.
From the very beginning, Henry wants to be free for his adventures. He seeks these out with women in nighttime Manhattan. Following a chance encounter with June Mansfield, he wants to marry her immediately.
She was a taxi dancer. They used to call it a taxi dancer in New York. You would go to a dance hall, pay a girl 25 cents, and she would dance with you and rub up against you. And she must have been very pretty, and she must have been seductive, and also she must have been unattainable. And Henry was like a big boy, a big little boy.
Und das war sein Typ. Eine schöne, große, wahnsinnig sexual bestimmte Frau, von der er übrigens lebte. Hat er mir erzählt. Er ging ja immer zum American Express und wartete auf ihre Briefe, weil in den Briefen $10-Noten drin waren. Er hat eisern von dieser Frau gelebt. Ja, sie arbeitete und sie war einverstanden damit, dass er als Dichter nichts verdient. Er war doch Telegrafenbote und Ähnliches, ja, hat er kein Geld verdient. Totengräber war er einmal, glaube ich. Aber auch das passte zu ihm. Ich glaube nicht, dass ihn das irgendwie bekümmert hat oder ihm Komplexe gab. Das gehörte auch zum Lebenshunger, den er lebenslang verspürt hat.
But Henry, I think, over time, he came to see June as kind of a muse who believed in Henry's abilities as a writer, perhaps even more than Henry himself did. And she was the one who kind of kicked him out of the nest and said, if you're going to become a writer, you're going to have to go to Paris. That's where artists become artists.
And Paris is indeed a wake-up call for him. He has already been writing in New York, but in Paris, he'll have the existential experiences that will form the basis of his later works. First, he fills piles of notebooks. He writes about people, streets, smells, and his poverty, his constant hunger, the search for a roof over his head.
I think that when you suffer deeply somewhere and you can't escape, you begin to accept the situation, and then you find marvelous things in it. Don't you know? So in the midst of my poverty and suffering and all that, I really discovered Paris, the true French spirit and everything, and got to love it. This was, of course, that's that hard thing to understand, that how can you enjoy being like that right down at the very bottom. As for the street itself, there one may still see the old and the bent, the genuinely demented, the beggars and tramps, the drunkard. It's so interesting, so fascinating. You're so thoroughly alive when you do that. You're living then with your instincts like an animal. And that's a great thing for us over-civilized people to know again how to be a bird of prey or, an animal, just wolfing every meal and begging and being humiliated time and again, accepting it, being pushed down and then bouncing back up again. Each day is a miracle that you get through, do you see, huh? This is a very wonderful thing.
It's the instincts, the urges that we aren't really consciously controlling. But Miller believed we had to be connected to that if we were going to ascend. So it was sort of like, as above, so below. You can't rise without having your feet in the mud. And it's like the tree with its roots in the ground and the leaves are in the sky, that image. To become transcendent, a transcendent human being, you have to incorporate all of yourself and understand it. So, and that was what Henry was about, in indulging all this obscenity. He was like saying, this is part of who we are as human beings, and I'm not going to pretend we're not this way.
In Paris, he writes his undisguisedly autobiographical wild novels, Tropic of Cancer, Black Spring, Tropic of Capricorn, and later, Quiet Days in Clichy. Miller has found his world and his habitat. Unloved America, where his books are banned as obscene for many years, becomes less and less important.
He called America the air-conditioned nightmare. As you know, he wrote a book called The Air-Conditioned Nightmare. He absolutely hated America.
It hasn't been too late. I will never become a European, but thank God I am no longer an American. I am one of those things you call an expatriate, a voluntary exile. I have no country, no frontiers, no taxes to pay, no army to fight for, and I adore France. Brassaï, the eye of Paris And it was in those early days that I used to go with him at night all over Paris, helping him carry his equipment and so on. And I got to see a great many parts of Paris I might never have seen through him.
Miller était un homme, un vagabond si vous voulez, un vagabond qui passait la nuit chez quelqu'un, une autre nuit chez un autre. Quelquefois il avait un hôtel. Il habitait longtemps rue du Maine, hôtel central, sur une petite place où il y avait le marché. Il adorait ça, n'est-ce pas? D'ailleurs, plus tard, il a fait des descriptions peut-être les plus belles qu'on n'a jamais fait de Paris.
His Parisian friendships from the 20s and 30s will remain throughout his life. Miller repeatedly visits photographer and artist Brassaï in his studio, admiring the sculptures that he creates there. For instance, there is a plaster Saint Sebastian whose body is pierced by cigarettes rather than arrows.
J'ai mis des gauloises parce que comme ça quand j'ai besoin
Whenever
de
Brassaï
cigarettes,
prays to him, he
je
gives
prie à
him some
Saint
cigarettes.
Sébastien et il me donne.
But once again, Henry is interested in something else
That's
entirely.
his wife.
A portrait of
And I
Brassaï's
didn't
wife.
recognize her.
C'est vrai, c'est joli.
Il y a 15 ans peut-être.
Was ihn interessierte, waren die Frauen, auch die Nutten, das Straßenleben, die Wildheit, die es vielleicht damals noch mehr als heute in Paris, heute anders, in Paris gab. Die Zugänglichkeit der Frauen oder überhaupt der Menschen, das Lebendigsein der Leute und der Pariser, die ja lebensdurstig sind, lebenshungrig, die sich gerne verführen lassen zu unerhörten Dingen, ja. Und das lag ihm, das Unerhörte, auch das Chaotische, das Wilde und vor allem bei Frauen. Und die Pariser Frauen sind ja experimentierfreudig und er liebte das.
The novel Quiet Days in Clichy, which he completed in 1940 and which was later made into a movie, deals with nothing less than this experimentation. Two author friends live together in the Paris suburb of Clichy, where they lead bohemian lives. If there's money in the house, they spend it immediately on prostitutes and debauched parties. Henry Miller celebrates his Parisian adventures in this novel. Naturally, the film provokes a scandal and can't be shown in a number of countries. Miller wrote several versions of the novel in which he processed his 20 years in Paris. Years that had started off with a big bang.
He is reborn. Reborn because of Paris, reborn because he's out of the United States, and then he meets Anais.
Anais Nin is an author with French-Cuban roots. She shares Miller's interest in the sexual. After meeting in 1932, they begin a stormy relationship.
He fell in love with her, I think, with the kind of the image of her. I mean, she was very quixotic and mercurial and unpredictable and a strange kind of woman.
Alles, was sie erlebte, war aufzeichnenswert. Und über Henry Miller kann ich mich an einen Satz erinnern. Seine Augen sind kalt, aber sein Mund ist breit und sinnlich. Er ist ein Mann, der das Leben verschlingen muss. Oder so ähnlich. Ja? Das hat sie natürlich ganz stark beeindruckt. Inwieweit sie verschlungen hat, ist schwer zu sagen. Ich hatte eher den Eindruck, sie haben ja 100 Briefe miteinander gewechselt, die erhalten sind, ja? 100 Briefe, hauptsächlich über ihre sexuellen Erfahrungen, aber nicht unbedingt miteinander.
Anais Nin, author of the now famous diary, an inspiration to and a protectress of so many striving artists, including yours truly, Henry Miller.
I just finished this book about writing and the writers, and I said that if they would trust that people could do this, if they trusted the artist to do the dreaming, you see, and then instead of taking drugs, say, they watched a painting for a long time, or watched a mobile for a long time, or trusted the artist, or looked at a painting very deeply, that they would be set off on their own dreaming.
Anaïs lives in Paris with her American husband, Hugo, a rich banker who also longs to be part of the art scene.
Also wurde nachher Filmemacher, ja, so abstrakte Schächelchen hat gemacht. Und er zeigte sie in der Kinemathek in Paris und ich ging dahin und sie war auch da und sie schlief ein und ich schlief fast ein. Na gut, und dann trafen wir uns draußen und er drückte seine Zigarette aus, so lange hat ich merkte, dass er innerlich kochte oder sowas, ja, obwohl er als guter Amerikaner bester Familie sich natürlich zurückhielt, ja. Und dann sagt er, nun bin ich doch Teil der Kunstgeschichte geworden, nicht nur durch mein Geld. Ich habe ja für alles bezahlt, auch für Mr. Miller habe ich bezahlt. Und das hat mich wirklich erschüttert. Er lebte zusammen mit ihr auf dem Hausboot. Und am Morgen stand er auf und ging in seine Bank auf der anderen Seite des Concorde-Platzes und machte das Geld, ja. Und sie war mit Miller. Und er hat sich das gefallen lassen, aus Liebe, vielleicht aus Bewunderung für ihre, weil sie ja doch so eine Art Kunstfigur war, ja. Und ich nehme an, das lag ihm. Er war mehr ein einfacher Mensch.
Anais is the muse, I think. He wrote Tropic of Cancer on that explosion, of suddenly, I am the happiest man alive. I have no money, no hope, I am the happiest man alive. It's wonderful. It's like exuberance.
And then, of course, there was his crossing of the line on what kind of language we could use in a book, what kinds of human experiences could be described in a book, what features of the human anatomy could be described in a book and how they could be described, the kinds of words that we would use to talk about a sexual experience. He just, as he said, fuck it, I'm going to write what I feel like writing. So that was a new kind of experience.
Tropic of Cancer is banned in the USA until 1963. The puritanical censors are relentless. The English edition can only be purchased in France.
Jeder hatte das genau wie wir am Klo liegen, da lag Wendekreis des Krebses und Wendekreis des Steinbock, damit deine Gäste, wenn sie sich langweilten bei der Party, das Buch lesen durften am Klo. Ja. Aber es war toll geschrieben. In Europa gab es sonst nur Schiller, der ähnlich die Regeln der Sprache und der Wohlanständigkeit durchbrach.
Miller certainly influenced the Beats, Kerouac, and he influenced Norman Mailer, and he influenced Cormac McCarthy. So he's an important figure in the story of 20th century American literature.
Which means set it free, setting it free. If it hadn't been for Olympia Press, in Paris, which people had to smuggle home in their suitcase, he would never have been published. Can you imagine what an explosion? And he's receiving royalties for the first time in his life. And he can buy things. By then, he doesn't care about money. You know, money is shit to him. But he has freedom. So there's a sense of amazement and freedom. Reborn again. Henry's reborn and reborn and reborn. In every epoch of his life, he's reborn.
This time, his rebirth takes place in California, on the cliffs of Big Sur. Henry Miller intends to retire there with his third wife, Polish Janina Lepska, and their two children, Valentine and Tony.
A cabin became available that he could have for $10 a month rent. And it was very primitive.
Miller writes and meditates in this paradise and paints his beloved watercolors.
There was no commerce there, there was no industry there. It was very pure. And it resonated with him. So he settled there and stayed there for 17 years. It was probably his longest tenure in one place, in one residence, outside of his, growing up in Brooklyn.
Everything that you could want from a father, from a place, was Big Sur. Just the natural beauty of Big Sur. But then having my father there, that's something that probably most other kids that were there didn't have, because he's a storyteller. And we had no TV, radio once in a while worked. We didn't have a telephone. So nights, around the dinner table, we got stories. And they were lovely stories about all over the world. Whether they were true or not made no difference whatsoever. It took us on a geographical trip and a mental trip and a spiritual trip. And we adored it, We had a question like, what is this word? What is this country? It's instant. He had the answer. He knew more people, places, things, or said he did than anybody I've ever known and believed. See, that's the difference. We believed him. So that it was joyous, He always had a nice glass of wine with dinner or two, and a gin and tonic before dinner. And I used to curl up on his lap at the dinner table, after dessert. And he had a corduroy coat he liked to wear, and it always smelled of Pall Malls or Chesterfields. And I loved that smell, and to this day.
The books that were published in France were generating revenue for him, but he couldn't get the money out because of exchange laws. And the books that he was publishing in the United States, which were tame and mild by comparison with these hot-selling Paris books, weren't bringing him very much income. So he was living close to the bone. He was getting advances from his publisher. He painted watercolors and used them to barter for services. He would need work on his teeth done, and he'd give the dentist a watercolor. Now that dentist would be happy to have the watercolor because they're selling for $25,000, $30,000. But he was doing the thing that he believed he had to do to be an artist, which was just right.
In 1963, Henry Miller moves to Los Angeles. He's now 72, and life seems to be a bit more comfortable. The courts have just determined that Tropic of cancer can be sold in America, so there's finally money moving. He moves into a villa in Pacific Palisades, but he remains a seeker.
One of his wives, Lepska, bought him that house in the Pacific Palisades because she was worried that he'd be too isolated in Big Sur. And also he kept saying that he was hounded by fans in Big Sur who would come and bother him at all hours of the night. And so it looked kind of like a corny suburban house. You know, it was like, it had columns, it was white, it was like, you would never think a writer or a poet or an artist would live in such a house. But the second you opened the door, there was some atmosphere that said, I'm home. I feel I can do anything, I can be creative. He had posters all over the walls, like sometimes they were psychedelic posters. He had tons of his watercolors all over the walls. He had different writing stations all throughout his house where he sat and he typed on an old-fashioned typewriter and wrote letters and stuff. But then he would have visitors, people like Brassaï and Picasso's grandson and Lawrence Durrell and these Japanese women when he married Hoki and all kinds, and just a flow of people who were interesting. Jakob Gimpel, the pianist, who was a concert pianist. Bronislaw Kaper, who wrote the song High Lily, High Lily, High Low. And he came over and he was funny. And I mean, it was just always someone special would be coming over. House was like theater or literature or something. And I used to go out in the back to the pool in the morning and maybe take a swim and hang out. And then suddenly he'd open the sliding door and he'd say, Tom, what's the temperature of the pool? And I'd have to go, you know, pull that pool thing up and look at the temperature. It was like a ritual. He wanted to know what the temperature of the pool was.
In terms of eroticism, he had this beautiful young woman who had introduced herself to him. Her name was Brenda Venus, and she was absolutely gorgeous, and she was a Playboy nude. Beautiful body, beautiful woman, probably in her maybe mid-30s at this time. And so she introduced herself to Henry somehow. I'm trying to think how that happened, but whatever. She was a fixture in the house, and she would come. She didn't live there, but she would come and see him. And he wrote her, there's a whole book, Dear, Dear Brenda, and he wrote her letters constantly. Huge letters, you know, 10, 12 pages letters. They were immense, you know, and it's a lovely book. And she would, as I said, once in a while walk around nude, which gave him great pleasure to look at her. But it was just sort of an octogenarian romance, I guess I'd say, you know, more with the idea of something than the actuality, a reality of doing anything.
Miller enjoys the bizarre, unreal side of life here. He's attracted to Hollywood and its stars. as well as the trashy part of the city. To him, everything here seems somehow sexually charged. And some of it reminds him of his time in Paris.
Das Ideal, das Henry Miller suchte, war die alles verzehrende, alles fressende Frau, die auch ihn auffressen würde. So kam mir das vor. Ja? Ideal nicht im Sinne von, wie man Frauen idealisiert, wegen ihrer Schönheit oder auch Unberührtheit oder so. Schon im Gegenteil. Die Frauen repräsentierten das Chaos des Lebens, an dem er Anteil nehmen wollte. Ja? Und die Frauen waren sein Zugang zum Chaotischen des Lebens. Ja? Er beschrieb ja auf eine unwahrscheinlich brutale Art die Geschlechtsteile der Frauen. Ja? Er beschrieb das als Eingang in die Unterwelt, sagen wir. Und da hinein wollte er. Das gab ihm die Chance, sich auszuleben.
He was that hot commodity when Tropic of Cancer came out finally. But again, it was like, always, let's talk about the sex and this and that. You know, if you don't mind me segueing for a second, this woman and man came up from South America. And for some reason, my dad had told them it was okay for them to come up. And they showed up with a full poodle, okay? Not a toy poodle, but full-size poodle, but done with all that weird haircut and everything, okay? They sit down and they have a nice lunch and everything. And then the woman gets up and says something to the dog and pulls her dress up. The dog goes up underneath, performs cunnilingus, okay? Well, I mean, flabbergasted. My dad was like, this is what they thought he was and wanted. See, this is almost through our lives, things like this have happened.
He invented this persona, which was a rebel, a man who did nothing but fuck. He wasn't like that at all. He was very romantic, and there was a sweetness about him. And I think he invented that fuck rogue character because it was the opposite of him.
Now, and this...
when Henry would, when he would plunge into relationships with women and he would do this kind of projection onto them, and then he would see their frailties, their weaknesses, their vulnerabilities, that they were human, and didn't conform to the ideal, then disillusionment would set in. And he wasn't really able to relate, I think, to very many women on a, what I would call kind of a mature, realistic, basis. And I think this is why he just had all these serial relationships and never really found what he was looking for because it couldn't be found.
In 1967, he gets married for a fifth time to Hoki, a Japanese nightclub singer who takes advantage of him and often leaves him alone. 3 years later, she abandons Henry. His infirmities quickly increase, and he will require around-the-clock care.
It wasn't a big drama. I mean, he was holding court every night at his dinner table, almost to the very end, even with his head falling down, and we'd pick it back up, and in his pajamas, always clean. And he just, as he said, we have to accept what comes, don't you know? I mean, there's this wonderful story about how he got up in the middle of the night one night to go to the bathroom, and when he got in the bathroom, he sat down on the floor and the door closed on him, and when Bill Pickerel, who was there taking care of him, found him the next morning, Henry was on the floor talking to the people on the wall. His bathroom was legendary because he had all of these pictures of people on the wall, famous people, not famous people, and he would be talking to this one and that one.
We're traveling not around the world, but around my bathroom, which is a little microcosm like the world. Now, for instance, is really, I think, one of the things that are the most magical to me in this whole room. That Neuschwanstein castle by the mad Ludwig of Bavaria. He was truly a mad architectural poet, and that is his greatest piece of work. He ruined the state of Bavaria, the kingdom, by the expenditures on his castles. To me, it's a magic castle. The outside and the inside, all marvelous. Yeah. Tom, over here in this corner, I have a couple of photos that I put up here expressly for people who want to be shocked. There are people who've already heard a great deal about the walls in this bathroom, and they imagine all sorts of things. If you notice, if you look around, there's nothing really very obscene on the walls. They're largely curiosities. But I put these expressly for those people, what you call them, who are looking always for dirty stuff, do you know? Here's a wonderful Zen story. It's about a monk called Roshi Bobo, which in English means master of fuck. Now, the title shouldn't throw anyone and may not mean exactly what people think, but there's one thing you can say about the master of fuck, that this fuck is an extraordinary one like none that ever was before. And the whole story concerns a young man, 15 years of age, whose parents sent him to a Zen monastery to become a monk and, of course, to receive enlightenment. Finally, after 15 years, he would go out and enjoy earthly life, you know, be a man of the world if he couldn't be a monk. So he slipped out one night with his bag and baggage, and he wandered into the red light district. And there he encountered a girl, seemed to him like a geisha, and he went to bed with her immediately. So, in the midst of this marvelous experience, he suddenly has what he couldn't get in the monastery, the experience of Satori.
Wurde ja zu Ende seines Lebens, hat sich ja östlicher Lebensweisheit anheimgegeben, ja. Wurde Yoga-Anhänger und so weiter. Nun gut, warum nicht? Wenn die Sexualität nachlässt, sucht man ja einen Ersatz dafür im Geistigen, ja. Und vielleicht hat er das gesucht. Aber dass er immer auf der Suche war, immer noch, auch als ältlicher Mann, das hat mich nun beeindruckt.
Hollywood is no replacement for Paris, the turning point in his life. He now daydreams about it more and more often. It's true he was hungry and homeless in France, but he also received great recognition as an author. In America, he is denied recognition to the end. He remains an outcast. The Medal of the French Legion of Honor, which is bestowed on him shortly before his death, is a final highlight for Henry Miller.
The day comes, my dad, bathrobe, and the French Consul General comes. Just a wonderful man, and of course, he spoke the most beautiful French you've ever heard in your life, right? So he comes, and this speech is like 15 minutes long, and it's all in French, telling my father his contribution to the French and to the world. I'm telling you, like me, he was just crying. And then they pinned it on him, on his bathrobe. And there, afterwards, everybody had, you know, a little salutation, and à la vôtre, à ta santé, and everything, and it was over, and it was magnificent.
Anais Nin, perhaps the most important woman in his life, visits Henry Miller a couple more times to talk about the old Parisian days. She dies of cancer in 1977, 3 years before him.
I never believed people who said that the obsession of death, you remember, that Frankl had and Lowenfels, and that you shared that, and I said, no, I didn't think so, ever. You played with them in their own terminology, if you want, but you never were very concerned about that.
Yes. Well, I tell you,
about
I think,
destruction, the destruction of the world.
But what they were talking about, really, Anais, was death in life, which so many people can talk.
Yes.
Death in life, don't you know, I think.
But you didn't know anything about that.
No, but I become more aware of it all the time, though.
That there are people who are dead in life.
Oh, yes, right. And that's the only death. That's the real death. Not this death when you depart the body, but being dead while you're alive. That's real death.
I think great suffering, poverty, living in Paris with no money, begging on the streets for a crust of bread, you know what I mean? He went to the very, very bottom, and then he saw the light, so to speak. He let himself go all the way down. And that's what he also advised to me. If you're depressed, be depressed. Be as depressed as you possibly can, but you're gonna come up again. And also, just being is sometimes enough. He also said that. He said, doing nothing is okay. There's all of this pressure on society to go earn a living, which is a bunch of nonsense, you see. And he said, sometimes just existing is sufficient.
If we get through this bloody business, we can thank all the gods there are, plus the Supreme Being, and Mahakali, Mother of all. What are we here for if not to enjoy life eternal, solve what problems we can, give light, peace, and joy to our fellow man, and leave this dear fucked up planet a little healthier than when we were born.
Dad, I think, wanted to believe up until he died that there was something better. But we never talked about God as an existence, okay, as an example. But he was afraid of how you die, okay? Because everybody in everybody's family has the horror story. His mother, you know, we all remember he flew back and it took 6 months for her to die, you know? And then he made paintings of her that her eyes popped open when he went to see her in the mortuary. You know, like her last fuck you to him. I think he died in the morning. And the last secretary he had says, I'm calling you from Palm Springs. I think your dad is dead. So I went down the next day and yeah, he was dead.
In fact, I don't know now whether I'm really awake or dreaming. My whole past seems like one long dream, punctured with nightmares.
I don't think that he ever got over his need to reconstruct his mother. I think that stayed with him until the very end. He never integrated with his own feminine inside and lost the need to find it outside in a form that was conformed to this ideal he was carrying. And I think that's maybe why he felt this letdown when he had completed Nexus. He kind of knew that the transformation that he had hoped would happen through the art hadn't happened. So he certainly achieved his literary ambitions, but whether he achieved his highest goal, which is this self-transformation, this transcendence, to reach your highest self, the kind of thing that Buddhist monks are trying to achieve, I don't think he did.
But Henry Miller does not see his life as a failure. Not someone like him, who lived from moment to moment. Who was Henry Miller? Perhaps the rest of us are more interested in the answer to this question than he was himself.